Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Huge welcome to Produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer. My name is Rich Steve Beck. I'm the founder of this awesome audio community. So feel free to join our community on facebook.com/groups/produce, mix and fix. Produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer. Or alternatively, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/produce, mix, fix and conquer. Just to let you know as well, with the interviews that we do, they're all available for you to watch on YouTube. So if you do actually have any friends that might miss the interview, then feel free to send them over to our YouTube channel and they'll be able to catch up. So we've got a fantastic guest coming our way very shortly. So, which is Mr. Cameron Craig. He's a Grammy winner. He's worked with Adele, Grace Jones, Annie Lennox, Suzanne Vega, Duffy, Bjork, Amy Winehouse, amongst many others. He's a fantastic producer, mix engineer, and recording engineer. And without further ado, just to bring him on live now, there we go, Mr. Cameron Craig. How you doing, Cameron? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Brilliant. So, yeah, really super excited to have a chat with you and discuss your journey and some of the fantastic artists that you've worked with, and also have a good chat about some of the gear that you like, maybe some of the recording process. I know that you said earlier on this evening that you enjoy mixing as well. So we'd love to have a chat with you about some of your mix processes as well, if that's good with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. So maybe just have a brief conversation about it to start off with. So like with the rest of our guests, what we'll do to start with is just have a chat about how you initially started off getting into music. So at the very beginning, what type of music were you listening to as a kid? What sort of music did your parents get you into initially?
I don't know. I sort of really hate that question.
Fair enough.
I do. I did listen to all sorts of music as I continue to do. You know,
Yeah.
I'm never really, a fan type person. I don't get into one type of thing and just stay there. It's always lots of different things.
Brilliant. Fantastic. So tell us about, what instruments did you initially pick up? Was there any particular instrument that stood out to you before you started in the audio world?
Yeah, I played guitar in the band as a teenager. I was quite often the guy that ended up organizing the PA and doing all that side of it. And then, I ended up getting a job in a studio and just realized that I wasn't going to be nearly good enough as a guitar player. But people seemed to like what I was doing on this side of the glass, so I stayed there. And the guitar fell away, pretty quickly.
So how did you get into audio then? So how did you start off? Did you start off engineering? Did you assist to start off with, or how did that journey begin for you?
It was, it's. I always think about this one as being a bit tricky nowadays, because I don't, the opportunities I had don't really exist now. It's all very, very different. So it's a bit strange sort of talking about it. But I did usual thing that everyone of my generation did, was we wrote to every studio in town and got 0 replies, and went and worked in a music shop for a little while, and then one of the studios that I actually went and spoke to then sort of got back to me with they wanted a person in the dubbing room, which was, they did a lot of jingles, so there's a lot of tape copies and things to do.
Yeah.
So I went and did that. But when I started out, there weren't a lot of role models in Australia, to be honest. So there was not a lot of bands that had made it internationally and sort of recorded in Australia. One of them was a band called Little River Band, and I kind of liked their ethic of, there was sort of band that would rehearse a song, not rehearse it, but be in the studio and hearing stories of them dropping in, getting every single syllable right and perfect, and then going away and learning it, and then coming back and trying to do it with feel with as much precision as they did when they did all the drop-ins. And that sort of piqued my interest in that sort of process. But I always assumed that the engineer on that was American because the producer was American. And then when I went and got the job at the studio, went in there into the main studio, yes, arrogant 17-year-old or whatever it was. And they were being a bit arsey, and I thought, oh, sod this. And they were building a second studio at the time, so I thought I'll go down and help the guy building the other studio. So I just went down there and helped him out. And he turned out to be the manager of the studio. So that played well in my favor.
Brilliant.
And then I sort of started progressing. Then I found out he was a manager. So obviously I went, shit. And also an engineer. So he was a head engineer as well. They also had one staff engineer at the time. And so I would assist him when he was working. And then one day these tapes turned up from Little River Band, master tapes. I thought, what's this about? It's a bit weird. Because it wasn't, it was at the time, it was a single room studio and not, it wasn't state of the art. But, and then it turned out that Ernie, the guy I'd been helping, was actually Ern Rose, the engineer that had done all the Little River Band stuff.
Oh, wow.
So, I kind of freaked out. It started, it was kind of one of those weird things where I was just like, oh my God, what have I done wrong? What have I done wrong? Every time he'd ask me to do something, I'd go back and double check it because I wasn't, I was really nervous. And then he sort of pulled me aside after a few weeks and sort of said, what happened? You were really good. And then all of a sudden you just started forgetting things. And so I was like, I wasn't forgetting, I was checking them, I was kind of and then, and then I sort of pulled myself together and got on with it. So was there for a few years.
Fantastic. So what happened next? What happened after that initial period?
Well, I was there for a few years. And I think he got offered to then run the studio he'd come from, which was a bigger studio, which he'd left to manage the studio I was in.
Yeah.
So we kind of got slave traded, as my former owner said. So I went. I got taken down to the bigger studio, but that was quite a culture shock for me. It was 3 big rooms, I think. And 6 engineers, and you're all vying for the work and things like that. And I'd kind of got used to being, king of the castle in my little place. So I don't know, I didn't last that long there. And then I sort of went freelance. I sort of it was quite a stiff competition between studios, and I'd sort of kind of got offered a couple of jobs from other studios there, but just sort of on principle, I couldn't do it because they'd been the enemy for so long. So I went freelance at about 21, I think, 22 maybe.
Wow.
I've been freelance ever since.
Fantastic. So what artists were you working with in your early 20s? So you were still in Australia at this point, right? Is that correct? Yeah.
So, I was really lucky because I was sort of trained on the job. I wasn't, he was looking for somebody to take over. He wasn't looking just to have an assistant. So I was quite often, shown what he was doing, taught what he was doing, rather than having to look over his shoulder and wonder what it was. Yeah. He'd just go, this is the phase button. See, hear the difference? Yeah, okay, all right, let's move on. It was just all that sort of stuff, which was, invaluable. And so, I moved up through the ranks pretty quickly there. Then went freelance. It was hard at first, as it always is. And then things picked up a bit. So I was looking, I'd sort of got to where I could get in Australia, I think, without it something dramatically changing. There were certain people, above me at the time. and I didn't see that changing. So I thought, I'll go to America, which proved quite difficult.
Oh, wow.
And whatnot, and thought, no, I'll come to England instead. I was scared. Yeah, I was scared of English producers. I'd heard of the Ellen Mollers and Floods, and I thought that there's no way I could compete with them. So I didn't really want to. I felt more comfortable competing with the Americans, but I didn't have a choice in the end.
Amazing. So what actually drove you then? So was that the main reason why you decided to move from Australia to the UK? Did you feel that it was the right thing for you at the time, or was it a massive risk at the time to do that?
Yeah, well, yeah, like I'd had a good run. Like, I didn't work for a year when I came here. It was very, very hard just to even get a foothold in. What drew me here was all the Britpop stuff, which was great and exciting, but I forgot to realize that I wasn't English, so I didn't really fit in with that. The conversation I had over and over again when I got here was, have you worked with Kylie? No. Have you worked with Nick Cave? No. Have you worked with NXS? No. Oh, and that was it. That was the end of the conversation. So, it was hard to get a foothold in, but I'd had a lot of time to reflect over my time before I came to England. And, looking back, I'd been involved in, I don't know, probably half a dozen sort of platinum or multi-platinum records in the 5 or 6 years before I came to England. So everyone sort of thinks that it was very much a up and then down again and then back up again. So it was kind of, one says, oh yeah, you got to start over again. It is quite hard to do it. Coming from a position of being reasonably successful, just wanting to be on a bigger stage, basically, and then getting here and not having anything you can do.
So how did you then? What was the next part of the process? So you said obviously the first 12 months in the UK were very hard to build up your client base and start working with new artists. So what was the turning point that things started to go into an upward trajectory? How did that come about?
Well, a friend of mine was over here as well. We'd just gone into a studio to do some demo stuff, as we had done back in Australia. He was Australian. And we just, I think we did a day or two in the studio. And then I went back probably 2 or 3 months later to collect the tape, as you had to in those days. And I sort of just went back, and the guy who owned it was there, and he's kind of like, oh, you're Cameron. I was like, yeah. Obviously, they've been talking about me a bit somewhere. And he sort of said, oh, do you want to do some engineering? I was like, yeah. So I ended up doing a few jobs there. It was kind of like Island Records sort of overflow studio called Razor. And so I would get a few jobs that were on Island Records. So and then I think the first proper one I did there was Kath Coffey, who was in the Stereo MCs at the time, which was great, but it was also didn't get released in this country, which I found a bit of a shock.
Really? Why?
The thought of spending all that money on a record and then not releasing it was just so foreign to me.
Yeah, completely.
Happen in Australia. But I don't know why it never got released.
Crazy. So were you producing at this moment in time as well? So were you still very much had the engineer's hat on at that moment in time?
I had been producing a bit in Australia, but no, it was very much in engineering.
Yeah.
I was essentially, even though I was freelance, I was the staff engineer at the studio, so they booked the studio and they got me.
Yeah.
So and then that led to doing a bit of work at the Fallout Shelter for Island Records thing, and it just kind of it's one of those things. It's just one thing leads to another. It can be slow and frustrating at times, but I bumped into Actually, I did have a manager for a few months when I first got here, and they'd introduced me to another friend of mine who worked at a studio called Chiswick Reach, which was a Valve studio.
Yeah,
they already had an engineer, but we used to go and hang out there as as friends. And then when he went on to do other things, I ended up working there a bit, which was interesting. I think that was actually a bit of a turning point. Like Razor was very similar environment to what I'd come from, so
yeah,
it was just I had to work the same way as I did in Australia. It was all very, very familiar. Chiswick Reach was just a world unto its own self. It was just kind of, it was Valve. It was all Valve. Some things were different. Something, it was just anything you used to do just didn't work there. You had to just rethink everything and just reevaluate everything you do, basically. So that was kind of useful because it made me actually really think about what I wanted to do rather than just get work.
Yeah.
Which was part of it. It was having been through it once already and feeling like I would have gone in a very different direction had I stayed in Australia. It's quite key to actually have that Chiswick Reach environment where I had to relearn everything. And it's where I met James Duval and a few other people. So that sort of kicked on from there. So
fantastic. So when did you start going into doing more producing? So how soon after did that happen when you started producing more artists?
Well, for me, it's never really been a progression. It's always been some things I like to produce, other things I'll engineer. Like producing's a significant more sort of, it's just a lot harder. You have to put a lot more into it. It's a lot. You have to actually have a real connection with the music. So you have to be quite specific on what you want to do, I guess.
Yeah.
With engineering, I could pretty much do anything. I don't have to be as connected to the music engineering wise. So, which I think my CV probably shows. It's quite varied.
It's incredible. Yeah, I suppose that leads us on very neatly to having a chat maybe about some of the artists that you very kindly sent me over. So let's do a little bit of maybe exploration with some of your favorite songs that you've worked on. So to quote you, Cameron, you sent me through this one. So you've worked with Adele.
Well, they were for public consumption.
No, fair enough. I'll leave out the general quote then that you sent. But you worked with Adele, Love in the Dark. So tell us about that song and working with Adele, and how did that project come about?
Well, it was a song written by Sam Dixon, who another Australian, but I didn't know him out there. We met doing Sia's first record. He was co-writing and playing bass on that, and he'd written this track with her. It was pretty hectic. She rung up. Well, Sam got the message on the Sunday, and he just sort of said, "Are you around next week?" I was like, "Well, I can be, yeah." And he finally got a text message on the Sunday, said they want to put it on the record, but you need to put real strings on it. It's been mixed on Thursday. This was on Sunday night, so
wow.
Monday I was on the phone just trying to find a studio anywhere, but all the main rooms were booked everywhere. We just kept getting smaller and smaller studios to the point where I think, this is not working. What are we going to do? And I sort of rang Sam and said, "Look, I can't find a studio." You could just sort of hear him just going, and then I sort of went up to see him on the Tuesday, I think, or maybe it was a Monday night, I can't remember. And we just sort of said, "Look, we got to think of something." And we'd just done some strings in Prague a little earlier with Jimmy, who he shares the room with, of the studio. He rents the studio off Jimmy. And I think Jimmy suggested, why don't you go to Prague? And we were a bit like, oh God, maybe. So frantic sort of emails to them. They said, yeah, we can fit you in on Wednesday. It's only one song, so it's only like an hour or something. So I sent my mic list off, and we basically spent, I can't remember now, like it was an early morning flight from Stansted, like a 6:30 flight. So we were traveling sort of with an hour's recording in the middle for the whole day, basically, until 10 o'clock. So we got up, went up there, recorded the strings, flew back, went back to my studio, comped it all, got it all prepared, uploaded it overnight, Wednesday night. It was mixed on the Thursday and mastered on the Friday.
Wow.
So it's the song that nearly didn't make it on the record,
but it did.
It did.
Fantastic. That's absolutely incredible. Thanks so much for sharing that one. Joe Strummer as well. Tell us about Joe Coma Girl. Tell us about that song.
I did the Streetcore record with Joe. It's kind of bittersweet, being, quite a, I'm not saying I was a fan, but have been a Clash fan. When I was younger, I was working with Joe was great. So it was quite a strange record to make, because it was they were sort of writing in the studio. I'd worked with the band a fair bit anyway on other things. And so there was a lot of writing, frantic writing, and poor old Joe couldn't keep up sometimes, because he hadn't really sort of worked like that before. So the guys were spewing out ideas to write to. Poor old Joe's trying to keep up, and it's like, write song, and then they'd be on to the next song. He'd be like, all right, next song. You try and write that. And then after a few weeks, he was just like, I can't do this. It's killing me. And then we took a break for a little while. And so it took about maybe 6 months or so of recording. We finally went to Rockfield to actually do a lot of it. And we're trying to get it finished there. I had another job to go to. They could have done with another 2 weeks or so. But I had another album to go and mix. And I've left them set up there to try and record some vocals. And I think they lasted a day or two before they gave up and went home. But
wow.
And unfortunately he died a couple of weeks later. So it's in some ways it was, sort of glad it wasn't there. It was going to happen. Yeah. So it would have happened in the studio, which would have been even more devastating, I think, than having it, while we were on break. So it took a while. And then after that they had to kind of piece together, see what they had. Unfortunately, a couple of the really, really good songs didn't have any vocals on them whatsoever. So
really, wow,
yeah. But and then finally got around to mixing it. I guess I can't remember the time scale there, but
yeah,
it was all quite sad in the end. Trying to mix it was really hard at first. So.
But what a legacy! And what a performer as well. But it was incredible just seeing him do his thing as well, and even like you said, if he was a bit behind, with the songwriting process, to just see a legend do his thing. I bet it was incredible.
Yeah, I used to have a camera all the time with me then. For some reason, I didn't have it that day, but would have been a fantastic shot of sitting in a studio called 2K, and he's like literally sitting in the hallway with paper just all the way around him. and he's just sitting on the floor, just kind of frantically writing out lyrics. Missed photo opportunities.
But the memory is incredible.
Yeah,
so good. Thanks for that, Cameron. Amy Winehouse, another legend. Tell us about Amy Help Yourself. So yeah, tell us about that song and how that came about.
Well, that was I used to share a room up in Kilburn, and Jimmy Hogarth was on the other side of it. He was just doing, I think he was just doing the pop writing thing.
Yeah.
And Amy was one of them. And Jimmy's just kind of like, "Do you want to mix this track?" I was like, "Yeah, right, give it in." Mixed it. We did a little bit in my room, and then we moved it into his room, and he had a nice what was it? I can't remember now, like Audiotronics or something like that. A nice little broadcast type best, and we put it up, subgroup through that. I think it was only 8 channels or something. So.
Yeah,
and then we just mixed it. I don't know, probably a day or so. I did a little bit in my room. Came in, Jimmy did a little bit. He went off somewhere else and came back and tweaked a few backing vocals, and then we did it, and that was it. We didn't think much of it, and we just went off. And then
wow,
a couple of years later. So I guess that's one good takeaway is you just don't know where anything is going to go, do you? So
no, absolutely. And what a voice as well. What a voice. Absolutely incredible. So yeah, tell us about so Sia, Breathe With Me. Tell us about that track. You said that it was nearly a missed opportunity, if that's right.
Well, yeah, we did Breathe Me, which came off the album called Colour the Small One, which Jimmy Hogarth produced. That's where I met Sam. And it was a great record. We put a lot into it. And we had some great players on it, and really put our heart and souls into it, really. And Chad Blake mixed it, and it sounded great. And then nothing happened, and she got dropped from the label, and it's kind of like, oh, great, it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
And then it was probably years later, wasn't it? It was quite a few years later that Breathe Me got picked up for the end of TV series 6 Feet Under, and off she went. Hasn't come back since. So she's around. She's Sam Dixon still works with her a lot. That's how the Christina Aguilera stuff came from that. Because Sam and Sia were writing for Christina, and they recorded it at the end of another session. So it was a bit of a weird one as well. I didn't even know I was doing it.
Well, now you've mentioned it, tell us about Christina Aguilera and the project you worked on with her.
Well, that was, like I say, it was after. It is quite funny. It was like we were recording a Christina Train record, and then in the evenings, Sam was writing these and recording the songs for what I now know as Christina Aguilera. So he's just sort of, I'm going to do these songs. You want to do them? It's like, yeah. Cool. And then after a little while, I saw Sam up in the yard, and it was kind of like, "So what you up to?" He says, "Oh, I'm mixing Christine's stuff." It's like, oh, thinking he meant Christina Train. And it was a bit almost a bit miffed. I was a bit like, "What's going on?" And then he's kind of like, after another couple of months, he's kind of like, "Oh, yeah, it's all done." He said, "I'll give you an engineering credit." I was like, "Too fucking right, you should have." It was kind of like, and then it sort of turns out that it's actually Christina Aguilera, and it's kind of like, oh, okay.
Brilliant.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Told me it was her. Everyone just assumed that we all knew that he was working with Christina Aguilera, and Numpkins here didn't.
I didn't realize. That's amazing. Thanks for that, Cameron. Tell us about UNKLE as well. So Only You. So I know that you've got a really good relationship that you've had over the years. Is that right with UNKLE? And you've done that for a few projects. Is that correct?
Yeah, like I said, I've met James at Chiswick Reach in probably 1998, 99.
Yeah.
Been working with him on and off since. So there was did a load of remixes, which is what he was doing at 2 Reach. Then we did a band called South, which was really good. Then took a break for a little while, and then the other guy that I shared the room with met James and wanted to produce James's record. Convinced James he should produce it, and he's kind of like, "Oh, do you know this James Lavelle?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he says, "I'm going to do the record." And I was like, "Okay." And that turned out to be Never Never Land, which took a while, which was great. But that was a record I had to come back to mix when I was working with Joe Strummer. So now I think about it.
Wow.
So, and then that happened. Yeah, I've done a little bits and bobs. Sort of. You do something major with James like that, and then it just sort of trickles away. And then sort of came back again for The Road. I think The Road Part 1 and Part 2, which are more recent in the last 5 years. So I've just been lurking in the shadows with James for quite a while now. So.
Fantastic. I noticed you did a remix together of Queens of the Stone Age as well at one point. Yeah, tell us about that project and how that came about.
Well, James just does lots of remixes. That's how he gets people to guest on his record. He'll do a remix for them. There are so many UNKLE remixes. Queens of Stone Age is one of them. That was a good one. But I did do something on it. Like it's a lot of those things. I'm around there. So a lot of that was, I think I did a lot of it to start with. I think I edited and got it all in time and all that sort of stuff. So it was interesting hearing the original multi-tracks. So did that, and there are others involved as well. So so I can't remember is what I'm trying to kind of.
No, fair enough. No, but to be fair, your discography is insane, Cameron. So Katie Melua. So I know that we had a chat over the phone a couple of months ago, and you're working with Katie, but you've sent me a couple of amazing tracks. So Your Longing Is Gone and Airtime. So tell us about those two songs that Katie did and how you're involved with those two tracks.
That was Katie's record. That's fresh in my mind. I know that one was only a year ago now.
Yeah.
It was a good record because it was she's a real artist, and she had to go through a sort of a process to kind of discover what she wanted it to be like, and it was just kind of having to go through that process with her was quite interesting, which I quite enjoyed. So it was it was hard. We took a long time. So I said it started in probably the January. I couldn't do it at my studio at the time. I had to be at Metropolis, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do it. I share the studio, so that studio I shared. So I couldn't be there when he was there, COVID. But then because he was doing a film, but he took off to Scotland, so I was able to go into the studio during COVID times because it was literally just me, and nothing else. So literally nothing else. I'd literally close the door and go and work, and then open the door and go home. It was pretty intense in that respect. But it was so we just moved from the Metropolis and still doing it remotely because she was still recording, but it was just trying to figure out what she wanted out of it. And she kept trying to take stuff out, and then just sort of the realization that she didn't think her vocals were strong enough, and that was the problem, not the track. So so she went away, and to her credit, she went away and did all the vocals again in like a day or so, with Leo Abrams producing. So,
fantastic.
but it was, there were quite some funny moments, but it was just a long journey, and it was kind of it was just interesting seeing with her. Like I do quite enjoy working with artists who, like, I don't want them to tell me, oh yes, turn that down 2B, turn this. It'll be like, I want this feeling to come across, and it's not coming across now. Figure that out. James was the same. The first sessions I did with James, he'd be like, I just want it to sound more dusty. And you'd be like, okay, and you have to figure that out. I did quite enjoy that. The same with Katie, where she was sort of giving me all her treatments for the videos and things like that, and kind of talking me through the process of how she wrote it and all those sorts of things, which was really, really enlightening and kind of quite useful.
Brilliant.
We got there.
Absolutely. As I'm guessing it was, I know we had a chat about this before we went on air, but it's been a very different process actually producing an artist online and having a video chat and working through everything as you went along. So a lot of engineers, I'm sure, watching this or will be watching this hopefully as well as time progresses, will, I'm sure, be working with artists online at the minute as things stand rather than face to face, and that's the norm for a lot of people now. So how did you find that process as a producer, and how are you finding it generally working with artists online at the minute?
I quite often worked remotely anyway. Before lockdown, I did do a lot of streaming mixes to people and that sort of stuff. So it wasn't a big leap for me, especially for mixing. It's not that big a deal. So I still, with James, I used to work remotely, even though he was down the road. It's kind of and a lot of other mixing stuff. You do your thing, you send it off, they come back with notes, and you fix it. Like I enjoy it. It doesn't worry me in the slightest. Actually, producing has been a little bit trickier. So I can say during lockdown, I am producing more. Which is good. But there's just different processes. So for Ruth Patterson, who's I'm working with at the moment, they'll send me a Logic session with the bare bones. I'll send it off to somebody else to do the drums. I'll do a bit here. I'll get guitar player in to play on it, and then send it back to them. I've not met Ruth in the person yet.
Wow.
And it's fine. It's just a lot slower. I've got another project where we're just sending stuff off and things getting lost in translation, so to speak. So we're having to talk people through things, which has been tricky sometimes, but it all gets there. It's just slower. So what would normally take, if you're in the studio and just say, can you just try this and try that, takes 3 days. Whereas if you're in the studio, it takes 15 minutes to try it and just go, that was rubbish, do something else. So it is a little bit, especially if it's rubbish, you kind of it's a little bit like they've taken 3 days. You just go, no, that's not what I meant. That's not quite right. Can you try this? But there's another. Because there's another project where we were able to go in and do the tracking in between lockdowns, which was great. All quite exciting to be in studio with people.
Absolutely.
I was saying his guitarist got stuck in Australia, so he was on tour out there and decided to stay. So we had to do that remotely. That was significantly harder, just because of the communication. I guess trying to get things across was tricky. So you'd say like this, yeah. Sure, he's got it and understood it, and then you get back, it's like, oh no, but how do we tell him it's not right? It's kind of like to get him to do it again and all that sort of stuff. So.
Incredible. Thanks so much for that, Cameron. So tell us. Suzanne Vega, Bound. So you won a Grammy for that one. So tell us what it was like with that particular track and that particular process, and tell us what it was like winning a Grammy, you know, at that moment in time as well. You know, I'm sure it's a nice, you know, accolade to have for the hard work that you do.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I've recorded the orchestra on that. It's just one of those, you know, those things that you just do. It was a good session. It was a really good session. I think we were at Olympic. Yeah, the record did sound great. Yeah, another Chad Blake mix, so that was really good. And then you sort of get this email just sort of saying it's been nominated for Best Engineered. It's a bit like, what? Yeah, you don't really kind of take it in at first. Yeah. Actually, to be honest, it took me about a year to take it in, to be honest. So, yeah, so we all sort of trundled off out there and did the ceremony. I just had no idea what was going on. Kind of like, I asked out to the winner, and everyone's like shoving me up there. I'm like, what? Why? What are we doing? What are we going up there for? Not being one to sort of like being on stage. So, no. We just shuffled up there, got our awards, went through all the press thing, and then that was it. It was kind of it was a lot to take in. I didn't really understand the significance of it for a good year or so. I don't think.
The rest is history, as they say. Yeah.
Yep.
Incredible, absolutely incredible. Thanks for that, Cameron. Tell us about Sam Amidon, so Maggie. So tell us about was it a folk track? I think when I listened to it. So is that right?
Yeah.
Was it a folk tale? You know.
Yeah, he's a folk singer. He's sort of American. He lives out here though. I put that one in. It's just a more recent one.
Yeah.
But it was just like I really enjoyed it because it was kind of. It's a pretty straight ahead folk song, but you know we got to sort of really mess with it sonically, and he was kind of well and truly up for that. So it just turned out really good.
Fantastic, brilliant.
That's one of those sort of my criteria. As long as things are, technically challenging or sonically interesting or something, they've got to have something about them that will draw me to it. So I just really like that record. There's another Leo Abraham's production, and he produced Katie's record as well. So.
Amazing, brilliant. Tell us about some of the films. So you worked on some film soundtrack songs as well, but when I've been reading an article about yourself, you don't typically tend to work on orchestral film soundtracks. It's more bands that you tend to work with, or artists. So tell us about some of your favorite tracks that you've done for films over the years. Yeah,
we did the track from Roma, which was UNKLE, was James Lavelle again. So it was kind of written backwards though. So
right,
we had the orchestra from something else. And then they had the drums as well from something else. So they had these kind of the main big instrumental elements, but no song as such yet. So, and then Michael came in and did the vocal. It was just amazing watching him sit there and try and work out the lyrics and work out the song, and we had to just kind of adjust the structure here and there and whatnot, but just did that over the course of a couple of days, I think, and then that was it. It was off.
Brilliant.
It was a weird one because it wasn't on the soundtrack. It was on the soundtrack, not the film.
Yeah.
So it was like songs inspired by.
Right.
So the director got a bunch of people that he inspired him and musically, and he asked them to do tracks specifically for this album. So.
Brilliant. And you've done a track for Hunger Games as well, is that right?
Yeah. Have I? Yes, I have.
Yes, you have. According to your discography, anyway.
Yeah, no, I know which one it was. It was part of the old studio before this one. I shared with Ivor Guest, who produced Hurricane, the Grace Jones record.
Yeah.
Which I recorded and mixed with him. And since that record came out, we've been working on the follow-up.
Brilliant.
So I think Hunger Games asked, well, I think it was Lana Del Rey, wasn't it? Who curated the record, asked Grace to do a track, and that was one from the album that was finished enough to be able to be finished to get on the record in time. So
amazing.
It was one of the tracks that would have been on the record, but it ended up being on that instead. So
brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks so much for that. Annie Lennox
on the record.
Pardon?
And we're still working on the record.
Still working on the record. Can't wait to hear it. Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Cameron. Annie Lennox, Georgia on My Mind. So tell us about how that mix process starts off. I understand that was a remote mix. Is that right?
Well, that wasn't really remote. Like I say, it was Mike who produced it. He wanted to work at a studio that was local to him, which was state of the art, which was I used to work there a lot. I think they recommended me to Mike, and we sort of we're doing a day to see if we got on, sort of thing, and then realized that we'd met each other before. See, some people are as bad as me, so we got there and realized, because I think Grace had done a big show in the front of Buckingham Palace.
Right. Wow.
And Mike was the MD. Mike does all these big show MDs and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we sat there and realized we'd met each other before, and we got on. So then we just started messing with the thing and trying to figure out how to make it better and stuff like that. So, and we decided that it probably could. It was, at the time, it didn't have a real rhythm section. It was programmed, and because it was sort of an album that evolved, and he didn't. I'm not. She didn't want to do it, but she was very tentative about making another record, and they'd kind of, they'd just been fiddling about and doing it slowly and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we got to that point, and it was kind of like, well, actually, it'd be really good with a proper rhythm section on it. So we got that, and we spent a day recording all the rhythm tracks. And then I got into mixing it, but by that stage, Mike was off rehearsing for something else.
Yeah.
So I'd have to mix during the day. He'd come in the evening, but because it was an EMI desk, recall wasn't really an option. So I ended up making up these great sheets, which I could then recall everything. So I just came up with a system where I could recall, still use it analog, but recall.
Amazing.
And so there was a bit of that going on. So I'd mix something, maybe do 2 or 3 songs in the day, and then Mike would come in the evening, and we'd just go through each songs, and I'd make the changes on those songs in the evening, and then we'd do the next 3 the next day or whatever, and then 2, or whatever. And then at the end of the week, Annie would come in and have a listen to it and just go over all these changes. We'd just repeat the process again, sort of thing. So it was the same philosophy of remote, sending the mix off and having somebody listening to it, but we're in the same room. So it was it was just having to come up with that system where I didn't have to recall everything if it was just a vocal that wasn't right, So I started to write it all down.
Amazing.
It was good. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Thanks so much for that. Frightened Rabbit as well. So you sent me the track, the Woodpile, and I know you've done a few projects. Am I right in saying with Frightened Rabbit, or is it just that?
No, it was just that one.
Project you did? Was it just that one? Okay.
Another Leo Abrahams production. A lot of the interesting ones seem to be Leo, don't they? Actually, which is good. And they'd already recorded the album, and I think the record company decided that track wasn't wasn't quite right. I think Chad Blake had recorded the rest of it, and so it was just a bit weird having to step into Chad's shoes, because there's one other engineer I respect, that's him. So
Right.
it was it turned out really well, and it was kind of quite a good radio hit for them. So
Absolutely, it's a great song. Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Cameron. So next part of the interview, so let's maybe have a chat about some of the gear that you enjoy and that you currently use at the minute, and some of the plugins, some of the software. So what you mentioned to me before the interview that you do use plugins, but you also use some outboard as well. So tell us about some of the stuff, some of the gear that you enjoy using.
Like I said, like I'm mainly in the box, but I do have hardware inserts.
Yep.
And I do have my Antelope Audio Orion, which is comes in handy. So I have all my EQs. Not that you can see them, but they're there.
Yep.
On hardware inserts. So I've got that. I got a rack of Neves and Telefunkens and a few other bits and bobs. They're like single channel inserts, so I'll use them if I can't get something out of the box, which is, to be honest, is getting less and less nowadays because there are so many good plugins. But I do have a mastering chain, like a master bus chain. Which is my smart CLA what is it, C1LA, which is the 500 series C1.
Brilliant.
Which pretty much sits on everything. And then just lately I've got the Roger Mayer 456 modules, which are like that. The name suggests they're tape simulators, but they're not really. They're kind of just sort of enhancers of some sort. I don't know exactly what they do. I think it is him trying to emulate tape, but I wouldn't say they do that. They just give stuff. They make things like a lot more harmonically rich, and just reshape the transients a little bit to kind of make it a bit softer sounding, not softer, I think warmer.
Yeah. So what about saturation then? So tell us how you what plugins that you like to saturate, or what gear that you like, outboard that you enjoy using for saturation, or do you use much saturation on your mixes when you mix?
I do. I tend to I do more if I'm recording, but I'll tend to set up a lot of other mics and stuff like that I'll then distort. I put a lot of stuff through pedals, as you can see. And just I like quite often if I'm recording it, I'll saturate at the time. So I'll try to put it through a Sans amp or whatever. Sometimes a guitar amp, but just whatever, just to make it sound different and interesting. I've been doing that for a long time. That comes to Chiswick each day. So I've just, it was because it was a weird desk. You could do really strange things. You could put a wah pedal on the hi-hat because you just plug it in and do it.
Amazing, love that.
Cool, isn't it? So a lot of those things came from those days, and just trying to recapture those moments just by using different mics. I have a lot of old weird and wonderful mics that I use for that.
Brilliant. Well, what mics have you got in your collection? What do you tend to use when you're recording amps and drums and vocals? I've
got quite a few. A lot of weird ones like Turner crystals and ATC 4035, I think it is. All sorts. I went through a phase of collecting just really weird microphones.
Brilliant.
Some of them are great, some of them aren't. But I'm not doing as much recording now. But when I was doing a lot of recording, you wouldn't want to use the same things over and over again because you quite often working with the same people. So I'd get different things each time. So I'd bring out another weird mic, so and usually distort the hell out of it and do all that. So
brilliant. I suppose that makes it more fun for you as the engineer, as well as you get to experiment with the artist as well and try out different ideas, and I'm guessing different placements and different chains, and just to see what sounds good with the music.
Yeah, I kind of like there was a period like that sort of mid 2000s period where I was just doing an awful lot of recording, and people were quite up for it. So I wouldn't sit around and change things and just go, all right, now I'm going to experiment now. It's just kind of like I just have to make snap decisions and go with it.
Yeah.
And luckily, a lot of those people were, up for that. So I just do weird things. It's kind of, just trying to think of examples. Like working with Jarvis Cocker, it was kind of like doing this track. He was doing the song Cheat. And it was the only time I've just sort of said, actually, give me 2 minutes. and change the mic out and kind of and got him to sing into a crappy mic, and he was just like, "You're right then." Did it. And it sounded great, yeah. So it was just kind of those sort of things. I was lucky to work with people who were up for doing that. It's a little less like that today, I suppose, but
yeah,
sort of working on bigger things, so you're kind of less inclined to kind of be as adventurous, I think. Well, I always have safety nets. So that was kind of what I do now, is I just have a lot of safety nets.
Brilliant. Tell us about with when you're approaching guitars, when you're mixing, maybe producing as well. So do you do a lot of reamping, or do you use a Kemper, or do you use plugins? I can see you've got lots of guitar pedals behind you. So how do you tend to approach guitars when they're sent through to you for a mix?
Well, I use most of the pedals I don't use for guitar.
Oh, right. Okay. Wow.
I tend to just do things in the moment, really. Like I say, for me, a lot of engineering is just sort of build up a knowledge base, if you like, of what works and what doesn't. So it's a little bit like very rarely will I sit there and go, "Oh, I wonder what this sounds like," because I know what it sounds like. So
yeah.
I've been doing this a long time now.
Exactly.
So it's a little bit like, all right, what do we want this to sound like? I do a lot of talking beforehand and just find out what people want it to sound like. And that way you don't get in the way of the process as well. So, Sam's record was a good one, where we sort of good example where we just sort of spoke about it beforehand. He was like, no, just do whatever you want to do and make it weird. And so I just had all this stuff, and he was just, the band was just so quick. I didn't have time to go, all right, well, this is weird song number 2. Let's do this. I was just kind of like, just threw it all in there and just got on with it. And we just did it.
Amazing.
And I just have different options. Yeah, digital. That's one strong thing of it today. So I just record everything, have a little bit of a tweak about, and then go with it. It was kind of it was a good record in that respect. So.
Fantastic, a lot of fun. Tell us about the so you said you don't really tend to use the guitar, the pedals for guitar. So how do you use those pedals behind you?
Well, things like that one was last used on vocals. There's a lot of filtery stuff, so, and delays and stuff. So that's a lot of it is vocals. Sometimes it is guitars, to be honest. And a little bit of reamping goes on. So they're sort of taken to reamping in the box now a little bit as well.
Oh, fun!
It's very lazy, I think, but it's kind of. But it's it sounds good now, doesn't it? It's kind of like it's not like you're cheating or not giving it its best. It's kind of like you put it on, you go, actually, no, that sounds the way I wanted it to sound, so that's great.
Absolutely. Any particular amps that you enjoy using? I know there's some great ones out there, like STL Tone Hub, and there's Line 6 Helix and Amplitude. There's so many great ones out there at the minute.
Yeah, I've actually been using the IK Multimedia one.
Oh yeah, okay.
The new one, whatever that is.
Amplitude, is it? I think
Amplitude 5 or something like
yeah,
that.
Yeah, great plugin.
That's kind of got a nice bit of air around it. Like I said, I don't do it enough to warrant going, all right, I'm a guitar guy, I'm going to do all this and be perfect. It's just kind of like, yeah, put that on something the other day and went, yeah, that works. That's great. Yeah, it did exactly what I wanted to do.
Brilliant.
Some of the Edison Miller stuff we did, that was when the guitarist from Australia, he sent a Kemper and a DI, and we ended up reamping that properly when we went to do vocals. So,
excellent.
Can't remember what we put through. Put through one of Jimmy's amps.
Amazing.
Lazy J, I think it was.
Lazy J. Oh, great. Well, if it sounds good, yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. So tell us maybe how you approach bass as well. With bass in a mix, do you tend to get artists to double track the bass or triple track the bass? How do you like bass to be laid down initially, and then how do you like to mix bass within the mix itself? So do you tend to maybe have one of the bass tracks a little bit more fuzzy and have another bass track maybe an octave down, or is there any tricks that you do, or do you just go for a nice straightforward DI and then play around with the DI bit?
No, I usually go for a DI and an amp if I'm recording. Like you said, the amp will have try and get a bit of room on it and a bit of growl.
Yeah.
So, it won't be close mic, to be mic back a bit, because you've got the clarity of the DI if you need it. So,
yeah.
And then it's nearly always a blend, I think. That was the thing with basses. I kind of like, if you're having to do too much to bass, I think it's not right. So
yeah, absolutely.
So people's all like, "Oh, you can press bass going in." I was like, not really, no. I guess I got spoiled with working really good bass players where you don't have to do that because that's all in their fingers. So
absolutely, yeah, indeed. Completely agree. Mic drums as well. So any fun techniques when you're recording drums with mic placements? Any particular mic placements that you enjoy? Anything out of the ordinary, or do you have a set routine if you're recording drums now?
I tend to have a set, your kick snare overhead kind of arrangement is pretty much set. Although it's change kick, well, it's not set at all, is it? I change kick mics and snare mics quite often. Overheads will nearly always be 40-38s, or something similar. But so just depending on what I'm trying to get, but quite often I'll just throw the crystal mic somewhere. Always horrifies assistants because I say, "Well, where do you want this one?" I say, "I'll just throw it under there somewhere." What do you mean? No, gently place it. No. The more you think about it, the worse it'll sound. So just chuck it under there, and that quite often gets used. Like I said, like quite often we'll set up a few different mics for different things. Sometimes stick them through amps. Depending on how adventurous people are being.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Cameron. We've had a few comments been sent through. So we've had a comment on YouTube from a chap called Keith. Hi, Keith. And he said, talk about mixing on an SSL. So is it an SSL that you tend to usually use, Cameron, when you're in a bigger studio? Yeah.
I used to. Like I said, I don't do most of my mixing here now. I was welded to an SSL for a long time. So in the end, I kind of ended up quite a few SSLs, especially when you got a lot of really, really dense music. They sort of just collapse a little bit on the mix bus. So I just did come up with a bit of a system where I mixed through the SSL. So I would come in and go straight out the channels again, back into Pro Tools, some digitally, as well as recording the SSL mix bus in as well.
Yeah.
So then I had the option, and quite often it would be the stems version that would end up being the better one, just because after those days, which I don't particularly miss, of spending 12 hours on a mix to get it right and have to go home. It was quite liberating to then be able to have that mix and have that sound, but not be committed. So,
absolutely.
So I did that for quite a few years, and I was mixing a Beethoven Street studio for a while as well, which had an old 4000.
Nice.
And the module sounded great, but the mix bus wasn't so great. So the G's a better mix bus, but so that that system came into its own when I was working there a fair bit. So
incredible, amazing. Thanks so much for that, Cameron. Keith is also asking about the story of your 33117S as well. I don't know if that's correct or not that Keith sent through.
Which one's that?
So it says modes to mix. So what do you like about it? Story on his 33117S. I don't know if that's one of your consoles or one of the models of the SSLs that you worked on.
The Neves. My Neves are 331.
Oh, Neves, right? Neves
33135. So
right, yeah.
Yeah, I have 8 channels of those. They're on hardware inserts now, so they sit there on channels 9 through 16, and I do, like, if I'm using them, I'll like more likely on an album project where I won't use all of them on every song, so I'll just tend to use maybe 2 or 3 on a song. So first song I'll use those 2 or 3, and the next song, it's a similar sort of sound, I'll try it on those ones. If it doesn't work, I'll move to the next channel. So you end up not having to recall stuff as much by sort of spreading them out.
Brilliant.
The luxury of having 8 channels of it, I suppose. But
yeah, indeed. EQs as well. Tell us about some of the EQs that you enjoy, either maybe out of the box or hardware wise or in the box. What EQs do you really enjoy at the minute?
Well, so I've got the Neves, and I have some Telefunken.
Yeah.
695s, which are little. They're transistor, but they go with. I have the V676 preamps.
Yeah,
they're sort of the same vintage as those.
Okay.
So they get used a bit as well. They're very kind of quite broad strokes, those things. So they're quite very sort of quite mellow actually, which is good. So use them like kick drum, fantastic.
Yeah,
overheads, fantastic. So
they
just do warm. They're very friendly sounding EQs, whereas the Needs would be a little bit more aggressive sounding. So.
Yeah. What about in the box as well? So what EQs are you using in the box?
I tend to go the Plug-in Alliance SSL. That gets used on everything, really. It's kind of funny. I think I seem to have adapted my analog ways into the box. So SSL will go on everything. If I want a bit of a fancy EQ, I'll use the GML. Their 5-band thing.
Yeah.
And that's it in the way of EQs, really. I don't like I get into some more surgical ones every now and then.
Sure.
But they're the two that get used the most. The Mag EQ4 as well, I suppose, gets used a bit.
Brilliant. Yeah. Amazing. I know for mastering, I use quite a few different ones. I really enjoy, like a lot of people, FabFilter, Pro Q3. For me, Melda Production's got a great couple of EQs as well. But I really love Pultec as well, like Pultec emulations as well. That's really fun. I know it doesn't sound quite the same as the actual thing, as many people would argue, but to me, there's just something about a Pultec that I really like the sound of. I don't know about you, if you enjoy Pultecs as well.
Yeah, very much. But I don't sort of really buy into the whole "is it as good as the hardware" thing. So for me, it's very much if it does the job, then it gets the gig. So if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's kind of
that's
all you can do, really.
Absolutely. you know. And then I suppose these days as well that a lot more people are going in the box because, to be fair, for a lot of people just starting off maybe or intermediates, you know, going out and buying a 4,000, 5,000, you know, bit of hardware, it's just not achievable for a lot of people, you know. So in the box offers them a fantastic solution, I suppose, if they've got great converters as well, and they're, you know, getting great converters and, you know, doing the best they can in the box, then technology, it just seems to be going that way. There seems to be some really great stuff, and there's new stuff invented all the time as well. It seems to be quite an exciting time.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with plugins nowadays.
Yeah.
So like I said, the Plugin Alliance SSL thing is amazing. It's kind of, it just makes me feel like I'm back on an SSL. So
brilliant. That's exactly what you want. That's amazing. Yeah. Fantastic. So no, Cameron, thank you so much. So before you go, before we also about a great chat about some of the gear that you use. So thank you so much for sharing everything this evening with us. So what's next on your journey? What your plans coming up as well with the artists? I know you obviously can't, I'm guessing with a lot of engineers, you can't share too much with some of the releases that you're doing, as it always seems to be the way the conversation goes. But what's next on your journey? So it's been an amazing few decades, but what's next for you?
Well, there's like I said, I'm actually kind of mid-project with a lot of those things. So
yeah,
they'll hopefully sort of start winding up soon.
Brilliant.
That other record that I alluded to that's taken a long time is hopefully going to be completed this year.
Great.
Year, hopefully. Where are we now?
We are asking me as well. May. We are May.
Man. Kind of quite busy this year. So yeah, no, that's hopefully we'll get that done sometimes this year. So
fantastic. That's absolutely
summer. So
fingers crossed. Amazing. Cameron, feel free to hang around when we go off stream in a moment. But thank you so much. We've been absolutely honoured that you've joined us today and really appreciate your time as well. And I've thoroughly enjoyed having a chat with you as well. And thank you everyone for watching as well. Really appreciate it. So again, feel free to come and hang out on our community, which is just under 2,500 audio engineers strong, which is facebook.com/groups/produce, mix, fix and conquer. And anyone that's missed this live stream, you can send them over to youtube.com/produce, mix, fix and conquer. But Cameron Craig, thank you very much, sir. Really enjoyed having you tonight. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Great.